Okay, we're recording. Okay.
We're going to go ahead and get started. She's got the mic.
I got the mic.
So I'm going to yell.
Okay.
For those who don't know me, I'm Marianne Schreck, the Director of Pre-Award here at Wright State. Welcome. Thanks for coming out on this cold morning. It's definitely fall again. I'm delighted to introduce Kim Marshall from DAGSI, and she's going to talk about the DAGSI program as well as the Associate Intern program. We've also got some folks on WebEx as well. So if they have any issues, email us. I'll be checking my email throughout, and we're going to record this for later on as well. So let's say if you want to go around the room and introduce yourselves. Melly, you mind starting?
I'm Mel Ludlow, and I do quantum computing.
Assistant Vice Provost for Research. Mackenzie Lawson, I'm associate.
I'm Blake Martin. I'm a student here.
Okay.
We've a bit of physics, and we have DAGSI. They know Tyrese.
Okay.
Rachel Ada.
Mike Raymer, engineering and computer science.
Jim, computer science.
One, computer science. Yeah, PK with computer science.
Yizian, computer science. Coach Shimazu, computer science.
Douglas Srinivasan, mechanical materials engineering.
I'm Julie Buchanan. I work in the RSP office on the pre-award side.
Liz Mertzler, Biological Sciences.
Scott Watamnick, new factors and IOs.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming, and I'm
Yep.
going to turn it over to Kim.
Okay. Thank you. So I am Kim Marshall. Obviously, I've been with DAGSI since 1995, and we joined SOCI back in 2018. So the DAGSI program is now kind of under the umbrella of SOCI, which we'll show you here a little bit in a minute. But before I get started, I have an announcement to make for those of you that don't know yet. I'm actually leaving SOCI. Next Friday will be my last day. So I've brought with me Miss Mackenzie Lawson, who will be taking my place. And I've been working with her last week and will through next week to try to get her up to speed. So she's got a lot to learn, as some of you know that have been around a while and know how involved the DAGSI program can be. But I will be working with her some even after I leave. She happens to be one of my favorite humans. So I've known her for a while now. She's been with SOCI for about 1.5 years. So she does have some basic back knowledge of some of the programs. But I'll be in touch with her and helping her out. So, you know, if there's ever anything that you approach her with and she doesn't have an answer, she will be able to call me and hopefully I'll have an answer. But so we'll get started here. Put together a little slideshow here for you. And then when we get done, we can do some question and answers because I know some of you have some specific questions. So SOCI's been around since 1967. They're predominantly originally a intern program, but they have brought together a consortium of 22 universities and colleges across the state of Ohio. There's two pieces to SOCI, the professional development side where they work with faculty and staff, lots of councils and committees and things like that. And then the workforce development side, which is where DAGSI falls. So today we're basically just talking about the DAGSI program and SOCI Intern. SOCI Engage, we also have that's very similar to SOCI Intern, but that's more of a high school program. So we now have interns all the way through high school through postdoc between our different programs. It's expanded a lot even in the couple years that I've been with SOCI. So there's 3 basic programs here that we can talk about where we fund students to work with the Air Force. There is the original DAGSI program that's the competitive program that pretty much everybody is familiar with. There is a similar research program that is fully funded by AFRL that is non-competitive. And then there is the SOCI intern option through, right now we can go through all directorates at AFRL for interns. I work with the majority of those directorates, but RX has their own program manager because they have had the ability to work with SOCI intern for many years. That goes back way before me. So I'll touch on each of these programs a little bit. The competitive research program is fully funded by ODHE. This program started in '99 originally, and it was kind of revamped in 2004. And that program from 2004 now is basically the program that we have now with just a few tweaks along the way. The program is a research team of the student and faculty that works directly with an AFRL sponsor and utilizes the AFRL facilities as well as the university's facilities, which is happening more and more at this point, especially since COVID happened. There's a lot more research that's being done at the home institutions. The program is open to master's and PhD students at the 17 universities that are part of the Research Ohio Council. So we do have, which one thing that gets a little confusing for some people is SOCI is a conglomerate of many other universities outside of the SOCI or the DAGSI organization. So there are some schools that do not participate in both sides, which can get confusing sometimes. As part requirements for the projects, there is a 1/3 cost share requirement, and this can come from AFRL or the university. And we will talk a little bit more about that in a minute, because I know that's a big question everybody has, is how to utilize that AFRL funds. The fellowships are considered a 1-year award, but they are awarded as a renewable award. So master's is 2 years, which is new for this year. In the past, it has been 1 year. So they will go through the same renewal process as a PhD student, which can renew up to 2 times for a total of 3 years. So luckily our funding has been increased a little bit through the state, and we're now able to do that. And the hope is in a few more years, if funding continues to increase, we can increase the actual value of each project to keep us competitive. Therefore, a student can then now have a total of 5 years of support through the competitive program. So they can actually do a full 2 years on a master's. They have to recompete for the PhD, but they can have a total of 3 years on the PhD. Restriction for the faculty, they cannot hold more than 3 state-funded projects at one time. And that's just the state-funded project. So if you also happen to have an AFRL-funded project, that's okay. There are some faculty that have a total of 6 projects right now. And so if you can handle it, that's up to you. So students through the competitive program have to be US citizens. There is some leeway with the faculty. If you are an international faculty, I would suggest that if you're going to apply for a topic, that you contact the sponsor that's listed on the website and let them know and go through the process of making sure that they approve of the situation. And, it all is a case-by-case kind of situation, depending on what the kind of research is. Topics for these projects are posted by October 1st, so the new topics are posted, and the proposal deadline is in February. Then the selection is made mainly by AFRL. I have some involvement in that, but it's more on the budget side of how many awards we can make. And those are announced in March. Projects can begin anywhere from May 1st to October 1st. The vast majority of them do start in May. We do encourage them to start early so the research can begin over the summer before the academic year starts. And we encourage up to the 8 weeks of research at AFRL. Now that piece is very flexible at this point, and COVID had a lot to do with that also. So I basically recommend that the student and faculty work directly with the sponsor and come up with a plan of action and how much would be done at AFRL, how much would be done at the home university. Obviously, every project's a little bit different of what it would require. My general answer is if the researcher is happy, then I'm happy. So if they think that you're accomplishing what you need to, that's what matters. No project can exceed more than 3 years, and that is determined by the state on how our budget works and our reporting and when we have to close out projects. So if you have a master's award, you could apply for a no-cost extension. If you have a PhD award, you cannot do that because it can't go past those 3 years. So then we have the option of the AFRL funded projects. Back in 2012, we created our first cooperative agreement with AFRL that opened up the possibility to cost share projects with the ODHE awards. When DAGSI joined SOCI in 2018. It was conveniently time to renew that contract, and SOCI is kind of a master at slipping stuff in. So they tweaked that contract enough that they were able to give a provision to not only cost share, but to fully fund projects and also fund interns through SOCI interns. One description or clarification there is the interns are considered SOCI interns, not DAGSI interns, even though they're on the same contract. Some people kind of get that confused. It is two separate programs, just happens to be on the same contract. And as of right now, we've had over $5.2 million obligated on that contract, and over 70 projects have been awarded that are, the majority of them are fully funded. I believe, I want to say 54 of those are actually fully funded projects through AFRL. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so DAGSI is part of SOCI, so the contract actually, yeah, the contract actually says SOCI because that's like the parent company, but it is the DAGSI program. The two vehicles we have are the ODHE contract and then the AFRL contract, but they're both, the names on the contract are SOCI because that's the parent company of DAGSI. So again, that does get confusing even for the researchers at the base when they go to obligate funds. They're looking for the DAGSI contract, which doesn't exist anymore because we're just a program as part of SOCI. So the contracts do read SOCI. Even the contracts that come from me to the university will say the DAGSI program, but it's through SOCI. So does that clarify? Okay. Well, they were two different vehicles because the first one is now closed. So the first cooperative agreement we had was through DAGSI because DAGSI was a standalone organization at the time. But now we're part of SOCI, so the new cooperative agreement that we have is through SOCI with the DAGSI program. Okay, okay. All right, so if you have a fully funded AFRL project, it is way more flexible than the ODHE side where we have minimums and maximums and things that you have to abide by. On the AFRL side, it is very open and there's no time limits. It's all determined by the needs of the researcher and the amount of funding that they have. So they are essentially renewable for the length of whatever the cooperative agreement is. They can start any time of the year. So we call them out of cycle awards still because we're still used to the regular competitive cycle. But they can start any time of the year. They can be a short-term award. I've had some that have been as short as 3 months. I've had some that have been as long as 4 years. So it just depends on what the needs are. A lot of times researchers will pick up a project that was in the competitive round that did not receive funding and they'll fully fund that project. That's actually how the ball kind of got rolling with this side of the funding. They can also fund universities outside of the state of Ohio with this money. And we have quite a few. We have Texas A&M, Georgia Tech, University of Connecticut, University of Illinois, and quite a few other ones. So that's expanding quite a bit. And that's kind of an exciting part of it too, because it brings in a whole new element from our perspective at SOCI. Research can be formed by the student and the faculty on the same topics that are used on the competitive side. They can be performed on the base or at the university, which most of these ones outside of the state of Ohio, that's how they are handled. And they are still just masters and PhD. There is no undergraduates at all through either side of the DAGSI program. Now we will take a student that is on the 4+1 program for the bachelor's and the master's, but they have to be taking master's classes by the time they start their research with DAGSI. There is no cost share required. We encourage it from the universities, but we don't require it. The student stipend and tuition must be covered, but everything else is flexible. Sometimes the faculty is funded, sometimes they're not. Sometimes there's a large miscellaneous budget that might include some type of other materials or even equipment have happened before. So that's all at the discretion of AFRL and what they need. Students working at AFRL must be U.S. citizens, but if that student happens to be a student that's never going to visit AFRL, or a lot of the out-of-the-state projects obviously can work this way, the student does not have to be a U.S. citizen, but that is at the discretion of AFRL. And yes. At
Hey, Kim,
Right.
can you repeat the question because the folks out on WebEx?
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, the question is whether the topics are for just the technical directorates here in Dayton at Wright-Patterson. And at this time, that is the case. However, the cooperative agreement is written to expand across all of them. And if it's up to Cassie, someday they will be. So I don't know when that will happen. Yeah.
Here you say that you deem the all directorates except RN.
Well, for the faculty, the student faculty research program, it is RY, RX, RH, and RQ. So the intern piece is to do the interns in RX, you actually have a different program manager because that is actually a different cooperative agreement. But I can do interns with RY, RH, RQ, and I've actually had some other directorates that we have started working with also. They just have to be STEM students. We don't do any business students or anything like that. So did I get all that? Okay. So then in this, the AFRL funded projects, again, they can be fully remote or they can be here. That's at the discretion of the AFRL researcher. So then Soci intern, these interns can be freshmen all the way through postdoc. And at postdoc, we also have quite a few faculty members that have been brought on as interns, even though they don't like to be called interns, which is understandable, but they're actually used as consultants for some of the other interns on the projects that they're working on. So there's a big open space there to fund students. One of the pieces that I wanted to kind of stress today is as a faculty, once you kind of get familiar with these pieces, it's possible to get a student funded by AFRL in their undergrad years and then carry them on through an ODHE project and then even back to an AFRL project. So we've had some students that have received funding from us for like 7 or 8 years because they've gone back and forth between the programs. And that's not a difficult thing to do if you have a researcher at AFRL that is interested in working that way. So it gives a lot of flexibility. So the interns can be full-time or part-time, seasonal, year-round, whichever. We work with a lot of students like from UC that are on co-ops that are there for a term and then off a term and come back a term kind of thing. So that's very possible. Interns can be in person and remote. I have interns remote from Texas A&M and Brigham Young and Stanford and all different places like that. So as well as some that actually come here from across the country, so they're not just local students. A lot of those students can be pre-selected by a researcher that might already be working with them on some other kind of project, or if they have a position open, they can actually come to Soci Intern and we will recruit for those positions. So this afternoon, I'll be doing that here at Wright State at the career fair. That's why we attend all the career fairs, is to encourage students to apply into our database, which is the first place we look if we need to hire somebody. And then from there, we move on to any resumes that we've collected from things like the career fairs. We also do table sessions. So we've done those here at Wright State. I know Brittany Edwards is here quite frequently hiring for students in RX. I don't know if you've seen her sitting in the Russ Engineering building. She does a lot of that, but we do other things like that for DAGSI also, and try to do those at least once a year if we can do it. Students must be U.S. citizens again for in-person because they're on the base. We do occasionally have non-U.S. citizens for remote positions. Soci Intern also has a regional program that are students that are not on base, but a lot of those are also STEM, and depending on the organization they're working for, they can take students frequently that are non-U.S. citizens. So all this funding comes through the DoD Research and Development Funds, which doesn't mean a lot to you guys, but it does it for the AFRL guys. It has to be a certain kind of money that they can use. And to date, we've had almost $1 million just since 2020 for students in my internship program. And I do have a typo on this page that I caught this morning. It says 12,000 for the RX program. That is 12 million. So quite a big difference. So I caught that this morning. Yes. I would say, I don't know the actual percentage, but a lot of them are, especially in RX, because RX specifically has requested to recruit Wright State students. I know they have students from other places, but I think she runs around 50 to 60 students at a time, and I would say probably at least 75% of those are Wright State students. So, and that's at their preference. And there's Wright State students in the rest of our program too. Oh, how many, sorry. The question was approximately how many interns do we have that are Wright State students? So, yes.
So this program, so is it initiated by the program manager on base, by the faculty, by the students themselves? How does that?
Yeah, the students can apply through Soci Intern, which is basically an open database that we will recruit from as positions come available. But the positions are initiated by AFRL. So a researcher will contact us and say, you know, I have this position available. I want to fill it with an intern. Now, sometimes, you know, as a faculty, you might already be working with somebody on base on some other kind of initiative where you can say, hey, why don't you hire a student through Soci Intern to help with this project? But the money comes from them. So that's why the position is initiated from them. They could do a targeted employment. Yeah. And a lot of interns end up in full-time positions at AFRL. That's really kind of the goal of the program.
No, what I mean is that there's a student.
Mhm.
Can get that in those countries, the program manager hires a very specific student.
Yes, they can hire a specific student. So yeah, if they're already working with someone, you know, and that happens a lot through my program, especially the students that have come here from other universities. I have not recruited for any of those students. The AFRL actually recruited them themselves, and they just funnel them through our program for the funding. Yep. So, okay. So this is kind of what I was just saying, actually. So the researcher at AFRL will initiate the position. Soci is kind of like the middleman. The intern actually works for us as an employee. So we take care of payroll, we take care of hiring, in processing, out processing, all of that kind of stuff. So the researcher doesn't have to do any of that. And neither does the faculty. Actually, the faculty is pretty much out of the loop on this one as far as we're concerned. Then we take care of all the invoicing and regular check-ins with the student. And the only thing that the researcher really has to worry about is whatever they have to do to get that student on base. So the base pass and CAC cards and stuff like that, we can't handle any of that stuff. So it's kind of a nice plan for the researcher to get a student in there. It minimizes their work on bringing a student in and out. And we do rehire a lot of students. We've had quite a few that were here the first summer that they wanted back the second summer. Again, so the benefits of all of these programs together and the purpose of it is to strengthen the university ties with AFRL and obviously workforce development and to bring students in to be full-time researchers, whether on base or off base with you know, affiliated companies. Since I've been with DAGSI for so long, it's been kind of cool to see. I have students that were scholarship students back in 2004 that are now researchers, and I have one that's actually got his first topic this year, and he's hired interns through Soci Intern, so it's kind of neat to see everything come full circle. We have a lot of students that have graduated and have become faculty at the universities. I think there's a couple at Wright State, and I know Ohio State has hired quite a few of our students. So there's a lot of them still around doing stuff that is affiliated with DAGSI and Soci Intern, and that's really nice to see. Yes. I have a group of POCs that I work with directly, but probably the main points of contact that you would want are on the website where the topics are listed. The POCs for those topics are listed there. I work with somebody that's kind of been appointed over the directorate, but if there was something specific that you needed to get in touch with somebody, I could, share that contact with you if it wasn't specific to a topic.
Researchers can apply for DAGSI. Students and faculty can be funded through the DAGSI situation. But independent of that mechanism, they can just also have interns that can be hired by.
Yeah, so there's three programs basically. So there's the competitive ODHE program, which is state funded. Then there is the AFRL research program, which is very similar to the competitive program, but AFRL funds that entirely, and that is at their discretion. So it's not competitive. It's, they can either cost share a project or they can fully fund a project. And then there is the SOCI intern program, which is also federally funded on the same contract as that. So there's 3 different programs, but 2 different funding vehicles. Got it? Okay. All right, and then that's pretty much what I have. There's my contact information. I don't have McKinsey's on here, but she will have access to my email for probably the next year or so until you actually have her contact information. We don't have cards yet. She basically accepted yesterday. So, I've been working with her for a while, so hopefully we'll be up to speed as best we can when I step out next week. So we can open it up for some more questions. I guess I can just go ahead and jump right into the faculty stipend question. I can step out here a little bit. I know we've made a change this year for the faculty stipend and how it can be funded or cost shared on the competitive program. So keep in mind, if your project happens to be fully funded by AFRL, the money that AFRL contributes to that project flows through SOCI, and there is no required cost share. So if you have a faculty stipend through AFRL, that is a full stipend. So, if you have an $11,000 stipend, you will get $11,000 through AFRL. It'll be billed through. So on the competitive side, there's been some issues because you have a budget constraint and you can only have so much money on that award, where especially now that tuition is rising, and if you have a student that has a lot of tuition, you can't necessarily fund the full $11,000 through the ODHE funding, and you have to cost share part of it. So there's 2 different options. We kind of changed it a little bit this year. One is you can have up to $11,000 of funding from ODHE, which there is no in-kind, there's no cost share there. So that is an option if it fits within the budget constraints. You could also lower that amount and through Wright State internally here, fund part of the faculty stipend through the miscellaneous line as long as the funding is available, if there's enough money there. That happens here internally, so I'm kind of out of the loop. That's where you're going to rely on this wonderful lady over here to help you on the paperwork, because we never actually see the Wright State budget. All we see is the budget you turn into us on the DAGSI form. So if there's something internal here that works for you guys, we don't have an issue with that.
The takeaway is please contact RSP pre-award early. If you're interested in the DAGSI program, it takes some time to put the budgets together. So we cannot handle things till last minute. I know that the usual takeaway, but this year we're going to ask for a little bit more time to make sure our budgets are status quo, make sure we're right by the research grant student.
Yeah.
The deadline's usually the first Friday in March.
No, it's in February.
February.
I think it's February 7th is the deadline. And this year too, it would actually be a little helpful for McKinsey if, proposals were done early to send to her early to help process them and get her feet wet a little bit. Because in general, all applications show up the day of the deadline, and most of them show up afternoon of the deadline. So if you have your project and your proposal and the whole package put together and it's early, go ahead and send it on to her so she can start processing. That'll probably help her out a lot. So does that answer the question then on the stipend? Did I explain that well enough? Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's the next thing I'll mention is if you haven't noticed the DAGSI website, well, the SOCI website has been completely redone. Thank goodness. It works so much better than it did before. But I did spend time this summer and I have completely rewritten the DAGSI site and redone all of the forms. So everything out there is up to date and current. All these changes are on there about the 2-year masters and then the faculty stipend. I think I've answered questions, but I am the one that actually maintains the website. So if you ever see anything there that either doesn't make sense or you have a question, you can now contact Mackenzie and we can get that out there. Yes. From the SOCI website, there is one of the buttons up front yeah, I think it says students. You go down, it says higher education. Is that right? No, the one before that. So does it say college students? College students. And then you scroll down and you will find the DAGSI section there. And something else I'll mention to you too that SOCI offers is the cross-registration, which I don't know if any of you are familiar with. This is actually a program that SOCI kind of oversees, but it's actually run by the registrars at the university. So if you ever have a question about it, you'll want to go to the registrar here at Wright State. But there is a vehicle there where a student from Wright State can say register for a class at University of Dayton and the credits will transfer back. So that is all approved through the registrars. SOCI just kind of brings all of those registrars together. But the original DAGSI, way back when we were a scholarship program, we did a lot of cross-registration. And it was actually through DAGSI, but it was modeled off of the SOCI program that has been in place for years. So that is an option that you might have for some of your students. If you want them to take a specific class, they can just check with the registrar and see if that's available for them. And the registrars can walk them through that process. Mm.
For the intel stuff, PhD student wants to take one of their classes. When I spoke to Dr. Cookie at Central State, you may have courses that might be of interest to your students. And he also mentioned that we can take it. But definitely an option.
Yep. Yes, AFID is part of DAGSI. So, and we do actually have an AFID intern program too, that's very specific to AFID. So, and that is taken through our regional program manager, which Mackenzie could connect you with if you need to. Yeah.
Going back to the budget, because master's is not 1 year now, it's 2 years. You do now still have to submit a 2-year budget like you used to.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So it's the same as the PhD, and you'll use the same renewal application to renew a master's for a second year as you would a PhD. So nothing will be any different than that. And yeah. And now if you have a fully funded AFRL project, you don't have to do that renewal process. The renewal is whether or not the researcher has more funding. If they have more funding, they'll contact me. I'll work with you on a budget just like you would on a regular renewal, so to speak, but you don't have to fill out the application. The application process with the ODHE funded projects is a way for us to check with the researcher to make sure they're happy with what's happening, and then we will refund this or fund the second year with the state money. But obviously, from the AFRL side, if they're not happy, they're not going to renew and not going to fund. So that's, that's that. But you will work directly with the AFRL researcher to get a cost share on your project or a fully funded project. Either way, you work with them. I'm kind of out of the loop on that. You're going to want, if you have AFRL as a cost share, when you apply in February, you're going to want to have all of that worked out with them to make sure that they really have the funding and they can fund it all the way through. So if you're applying for a 3-year PhD, they either need to be able to fund it for all 3 years, or you have to have Wright State backed up to do the cost share if they can't have it. Because if we don't have the cost share in place, then we won't fund the project. Yes.
So you said AFIT is part of the four-year program manager from RX. How do we get to this AFIT? Because they're not part of it.
Right. So AFIT students can be interns through. Oh.
Because from our point of view, that's cool. We don't have that. We're looking at that stuff. We would want to look into that, but I think it's
Okay, that I would have to actually check with the program manager that handles the AFIT internship program, because I'm not familiar with all those pieces. I got your card here. I will get that answer because the program manager, her name's Sandy Henry, and so she handles all that. I probably would give you the wrong answer. So yeah. Oh, cross registration. As far as I know, you can cross register with AFIT, but again, it's kind of the discretion of the registrars. So if AFIT says yes, then obviously you could do it. But AFIT's always, a little more tricky with stuff like that. But you could definitely look into it. Yeah.
Because I see a problem in having a over deadline. So for example, if I want to have a master's student for this application, that means to say I have to know that already before.
Well, the application deadline, is in February.
So that means to say if we have an incoming master's student just arrived in August,
Right.
we don't have to wait for.
Right. They would only get the second year. Yeah.
There's no way to avail of the 2 years. So it's typically just the second year. So I was wondering, would DAGSI consider changing the deadline so then the deadline is sometime in September? So you can start prepping in the summer for a proposal, but then the student comes in August and talks. And then the deadline is September. The student can start sometime in November and still be able to have access to those 2 years.
Well, I don't think that that would probably work well, because we have to be able, and part of this works with the university, is when we fund a student, we have to fund them for the entire semester. So if the student has already started, I think that's part of the reason the cycle is the way that it is, of the timing, is because we have to have the funding in place for the student before they start in August or whatever the date is. So we do the cycle in the spring time with the intent that the student starts their research in the summer before they even start their academic year. So that's the typical route. And that originated way back at the beginning, when we had just 3 schools, basically, was Wright State and AFIT and UD. And that schedule was originally determined by the deans that were in those 3 positions at that time. So to change the whole cycle, I see your point, to change it, that makes sense. But I don't know, because of the way the funding works and the way the invoicing works, it would complicate things on that end. We have that same issue with fully funded students from AFRL, that we always have to start the funding at the beginning of the term. Otherwise, the student can't get their tuition paid for. They end up having to have it paid for a different way. Because the beginning process of all this is obviously getting the contracts in place. And if it's not in place when the student starts, then that causes a problem for the student. And we had an issue this past year, I believe it was at UD, where the researcher, the project started, but the researcher dragged their feet on getting the funding to us so we could do the contract, and the student ended up being dropped out of all of their classes because we couldn't get the contract in place fast enough. So, we want to avoid that, because technically the whole program revolves around the student. When it's the student getting funded more than anything else. So Does anybody else have any questions? Did I cover it all? Okay, well, great. Yep. Yeah, and I brought some printed copies with me too. So, oh. Okay. Yeah, yeah, that's not in my copy. So yeah, yeah, that was a big boo-boo when I saw it this morning. My fault. I know. So, well, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it, and hope you learned something from all this. And in the future, Mackenzie will be there for you, and hopefully be able to answer all your questions. Go easy on her for a while. So, okay, well, thanks a lot. Yep.